So hello, everybody, and welcome to today's webinar, Why AI is a Game Changer for Your Business and Your Apps. I'm your host, Ian, the CEO of Fliplet, and I have a very special guest joining me today, Sophie from Eversheds Sutherland. But Sophie's going to join us in a little bit and introduce herself, so I won't steal her thunder yet. On today's agenda, we're going to be covering four main topics. We're going to cover the different types of AI and a little bit about AI's history, the risks of AI and how to manage them, how you can use AI to produce apps quickly with Fliplet, and how you can use AI within your apps to improve your apps. It'll take about 30 minutes, but we've got a lot of a lot of content to cover today, so I'm going to be going quite quickly. If I go too fast, you can always ask us for the recording afterwards. If you have any questions or any suggested topics that you'd like to cover, please put them into the QA feature inside Zoom. They will go privately directly to Fliplet, so you don't need to worry about anybody else seeing those questions. And it'll be really helpful because we're already due to demand of this webinar on May 17th. So if we don't cover anything that you'd like to see us cover in a future webinar, please post that in the QA feature as well. So briefly, what is Fliplet? So Fliplet is a no-code and low-code app builder. You can use it to build mobile and web apps. It has lots of different features, lots of different pre-built solutions, but you can also create your own solutions. But why would you want to combine Fliplet with AI? I felt like it was an important topic to cover before we got too deep into AI, or you might be wondering, like, I don't really understand what Fliplet is, or I don't really understand how you can pair Fliplet with AI. So Fliplet offers the following features. We have a very extensive set of data and file access capabilities or management capabilities. That's really important when pairing it with AI because it means you can use Fliplet to store your data, and then AI via Fliplet can have access to data in a safe fashion, of course, in order to then provide the answers back via your app via Fliplet to users. Fliplet is secure and compliant with ISO 27001 and is regularly audited for security compliance. We have experience safely integrating with third-party APIs. We do it all the time. And AI is just a new API to us, which we're also safely integrating with. Fliplet has recently added a set of new APIs, giving you access to OpenAI's APIs. Sorry, that is very hard to say fast. So if you're interested while you're listening to me on this webinar, you can actually start looking at our API documentation today. It's at developers.fliplet.com. And all you do is just search for AI. We're also constantly monitoring other AI providers in the that are coming out. And if they become as useful as OpenAI's is, we will look to incorporate them and provide APIs to them as well. We're currently building a suite of our own AI features, and we're going to talk more about them today. You can store the output of AI in Fliplet, reducing your dependency on AI APIs, which is really important, as you'll see in a demo I give later. The performance of some of these AI APIs is a little bit slow at the moment. So being able to cache the response and access it quickly without having to go back to AI or the API all the time is potentially really important to create a high-performant and reliable experience for your users. Fliplet offers lots of complementary features, including notifications, analytics, and branding, which you don't have to build. You just get it by using our platform. And we offer native mobile apps and web apps. So let me talk about the AI types and history. So firstly, there are three things that I'm going to cover when it comes to AI: large language models, or LLMs, AI agents, and AI products. Large language models, and this is a definition that I took from the website on screen. They're machine learning models that use deep learning algorithms to process and understand natural language. These models are trained on massive amounts of text data to learn patterns and entity relationships in the language. They can understand complex textual data, identify entities and relationships between them, and generate new text that is coherent and grammatically accurate. You'll notice that that does not say they are intelligent and able to do things that humans can do. They are simply pattern matching. And that's really important to keep in mind. So let's just have a look at some of the different large language models that are available. As you can see here, BERT, the very first one, was created in 2018. So these have been around for quite some time. I'm sure that there were models back earlier than this, but these are just the recent LLMs. And you can see that obviously there's been a lot more of them created more recently. The other really interesting thing is the number of parameters each of these LLMs have. I'm sure you would agree with me, the difference between BERT with 340 million parameters and some of the newer GPT-3, for example, with 175 billion parameters, maybe gives us a bit of an understanding about why these large language models have gotten so much better so fast. And if you'd like to learn more, Microsoft has a lot of information about these models available. For this presentation, we're really only going to focus on OpenAI GPT models and ChatGPT access. And the reason why is it's because the OpenAI products are the most advanced models available that we can access. So jumping on, what's an AI agent? An AI agent is an autonomous piece of software that can perform multiple tasks and share the output of the tasks with other tasks. So let me give you an example. On the right, you can see a screenshot. What I did is I typed in, produce a report comparing 5 no-code app building tools, including Fliplet. The agent then asked itself, how would I do this task? And immediately came up with 3 tasks. It decided to research and compile information on 5 no-code app buildings, analyze and compare the features, and include detailed information. So it gave itself 3 tasks, and then it started working on them. After about a minute, you can see the current tasks on the right. It got past the first 3, and it started to add more. It did this fully autonomously. All I did was give it the original prompt. That's pretty cool. This is AI using AI to deliver work to me. There are 2 main solutions out there, Agent GPT and Auto GPT. If you'd like to learn more about them, you can look them up. As you can see, Agent GPT has a very easy to use web interface. You can go and have a bit of a play with it. What can you use these for? So some clever developers have been using these to write, deploy, test, and fix code. They've literally been getting AI to do all of the tasks that a developer would usually do. You can get it to research topics just like I have. And some of the agents also have access to the internet so they can do research online. Some of the other agents can access the internet and actually interact with e-commerce websites. So one of the demos that agents have been seen to do is order pizza for people. They just say, order me a pepperoni pizza from Domino's, and off it goes, and it completes the entire process for them. And then finally, configure software. Sometimes software configuration, a bit like programming, is a bit of trial and error. You've got to research the right settings. You've got to apply the settings. You've got to check if the settings work, etc. Agents can also do that. So agents are really, they're starting to enable AI to act more like humans and do a whole chain of commands that depend on the output of previous commands. Agents plus AI plus integrations equal AI performing tasks intelligently like humans. That's the reason why I wanted to mention it in this presentation. Moving on, and finally, we've got AI products. So many new products have entered the market recently, citing that they are AI-based. This usually means that what they've done is they've taken one of the LLM models, such as OpenAI's, and they're applying it to usually a very specific use case. The popular use cases are text generation or manipulation, 2D or 3D image generation or manipulation, audio video generation, data analysis, code analysis, and code generation. I describe these use cases all as phase 1 use cases. These are all use cases being built on top of the current models, which is awesome, but these models are getting so much better so fast. I expect, couple this with agents as well, that what you'll see is much more sophisticated use cases coming over the next few months. And the screenshot on the right is from a website called There's an AI for That. I think it's there's an AI for that.com if you want to look it up. That screenshot represents probably just the number of new AI products launched in the day that I took the screenshot, which was, I think, on Monday. The amount of new products getting launched that claim to have AI in them is significant. Trust me, go and have a look at that website and be overwhelmed at how many different new products are getting launched every day. So now I'd like to segue over to Sophie, who's going to introduce and talk to us about the risks of AI and how to manage them. So Sophie, take it away.
Thanks, Ian. So I'm Sophie Grogan. I'm a product owner at Eversheds Sutherland, and I'm going to discuss some of the risks associated with using AI that you should be aware of. So very quick background on where I work and what I do. So Eversheds Sutherland is a global top 10 law practice, and we provide legal advice and solutions to international clients, including some of the world's largest multinationals. The team I sit in look after tools that assist in the creation, the review, and the execution of legal documents, and we're responsible for some of the AI tools within the firm. So speaking about some of the risks and limitations of using AI. Firstly, data. You need to understand what data sources sit behind the technology. And this is particularly relevant for this new type of generative AI, and that includes ChatGPT, which most people are familiar with. So version 3.5, the free version, was only trained on data up to 2021. It doesn't have any access to data beyond that. So if you ask it who the Prime Minister of the UK is today, it won't give you the correct answer. Many generative AI solutions don't provide the use of data sources used to generate the information given, which makes it really hard to fact check, and users aren't able to understand how answers are generated. Now, that's not the case with all the generative AI solutions, but it's something to be aware of. Keep in mind, in many cases, if you don't pay for the product, then you probably are the product, and that includes your data. Another issue is the privacy and security of what you're putting into these AI tools. Do you know where the information is going, and do you know who has access to it? Particularly with public AI or AI that is free to use, you need to be wary of putting in any confidential information, any business information, or customer information, because free use tools tend to mean that your data is the currency. So make sure you're not sharing anything you don't want others to know. There's also risks around data bias. So the algorithms and machines that support artificial intelligence have been trained by humans, which is great, but it also means that there are risks of unconscious bias and in some cases political bias. A really good example was a tweet that someone put out where they'd asked ChatGPT to write a nice poem about the positive attributes of Obama. And it responded with this lovely poem. And then the same question was asked for Donald Trump, and the chatbot refused to do so because of the negative bias. Now, regardless of your position in politics or what you think of Trump or Obama, our tech needs to be neutral. Another issue around data bias is the sources that AI tools tend to scrape from are from the web, and the web tends to be predominantly created by Western countries, which means there's a bias towards Western information. And so if you're in a global business, you need to keep in mind that many free generative AI tools might not have access to information in certain countries where data isn't as readily available. And so any answers to prompts that you get might not have a true global context. And speaking of context, this then moves us on to the importance of user understanding and the risk of using the tools blindly. So if you are using the tool, you should have a good understanding of what you're actually asking the AI tool to do for you. So though many AI tools can help to automate the process for the users, if users don't have an understanding of what correct outcomes they should be, there is a risk that the AI tool could fool the user with an incorrect answer. This is extremely relevant of generative AI because this can hallucinate, which means the machine produces very convincing answers that sound plausible, but they're incorrect or unrelated to the context. And I'm sure you've all seen the recent example, which made headlines when Google released their Bard advert, where an incorrect answer was shown in response to a prompt, leading to 100 billion wiped off of their share price. And I know I wouldn't want to be the person making that advert. Finally, in fact, just before we touch on the last point, one thing to remember is, do you know whose content it is that you're looking at? So when you ask for prompts using public AI, there is a risk of the content created resulting in misrepresentation or copyright claims. So if the AI tool doesn't provide a data source, it's not clear for the user to understand if that answer contains any copyrighted materials from publishing companies, individual authors, or any researchers. And there are already cases of lawsuits being pursued. And finally, and this is the last one, if you operate within a regulated sector, you do need to check regularly for any guidance provided by your regulator in this area. And this is extremely fast moving, as Ian mentioned. Like, the way that this is increasing is literally mental. Many different countries have put their own acts out. Italy, for example, has already banned the use of ChatGPT. Whether they reinstate it or not is yet to be seen. But it's really important that if you are using this tool, you need to stay up to date with what your regulator suggests. I'm now going to pass back over to Ian, and he'll discuss how you can manage some of these risks.
Excellent. Thank you very much, Sophie. That was really good. You definitely made kind of a potentially negative topic sound kind of quite upbeat. So thank you. So data compliance and regulation risks. So now I'm going to focus on, okay, we're aware of the risks, but how do we manage them? How do we keep them under control? Because I think not doing anything with AI would be the wrong move. And I'll talk a little bit about why that's the case in a moment. So how do you ensure data compliance and regulation risk is managed? Well, the key thing is just don't give it any data that you wouldn't want it to potentially use. Now, there's a couple of other things that you can take into consideration and techniques you can use. By the way, the first one I found out by asking AI how I ensure that it doesn't get access to my data, which is a little bit meta. So the first thing is you've got to make sure that you have approval under GDPR to actually process the person's data. If they haven't given you access, then you can't give it to AI, you can't give it to other sub-processing services. So verify that. That's usually included in the terms of service that people agree to. And of course, you can change your terms of service, but you have to go through a certain process. The other thing is, if you do have approval and you then share the data with AI, you should de-identify it or pseudonymize the data, which is exactly in line with a lot of privacy legislation. This obviously gives you the ability to basically take out anything that could identify the data to AI. So even if it was to use it, it would not be able to come back and figure out where the data came from or who it relates to. The second point on my slide is do not allow your data to be used by third parties. So OpenAI's API does not use the data to improve its large language model, but it does use the data in ChatGPT 2 unless you opt out. And you can read more about it on the link that I posted there. The third item, just as Sophie said, is monitor government guidance and regulations. This is moving at an insanely fast pace. Eversheds, and I'm not saying this just because Sophie's here, literally it is a great summary. Eversheds has a great summary of the recent ICO and UK government guidance at this URL. But of course, you can go and find that information yourself elsewhere. But yeah, I mean, governments are moving surprisingly quick around AI, considering sometimes they're quite slow. And I think that this is because of just how much of an impact it's having. How do you manage bias, errors, and intellectual property risk? Well, as Sophie said, GPT doesn't have any data past 2021, including, I think, GPT-4 as well as GPT 3.5. General questions are more likely to lead to incorrect answers, and the source of data is not public, so you don't know where it's getting its information from. How do you manage these risks? Well, you need to be very specific with your prompts. I will show you some example prompts in a second. You can see how specific I've had to be to get the right answers. You can verify the data before using it. So you can always get a response back and then use Google or other sources to try to validate, is this information correct? And then, of course, even if you do test it, you've got to keep retesting it, because if you're using the same prompt over and over again, maybe in different scenarios, the underlying algorithms are continuously evolving. It's common knowledge that if you ask AI kind of the same question multiple times, you'll get different answers. So it's really important that not only you're restricting what it's doing using prompts, but also you're continuously testing to ensure that your prompts are continuously working. So on to job displacement. I think most people are concerned about what's the economic impact going to be, positive or negative, around AI, because it is moving so fast and it's kind of seemingly come out of nowhere. You know, in Q3 last year, a couple of companies were talking about AI. In Q4 last year, everybody was talking about AI. And now you're having, you know, hundreds of new products built every single month using AI. I mean, this is unprecedented. So the primary jobs that the Goldman Sachs recent economic analysis of AI highlighted were at risk are jobs related to copywriting, document modification, etc. Primarily jobs where you're moving around large volumes of text. So how do you manage this? Well, you learn how to use AI. You help others to use AI because their ideas will help you. This presentation is a summary of Fliplet and our advisors' current thinking on AI. It would definitely not be as good if I wasn't getting other people's opinions on it. And then finally, encourage your staff to use AI responsibly by teaching them the rules you want them to follow. Because a bit like telling somebody, like, don't use your computer for personal work, it's very hard to police. So I think it's potentially unrealistic to say, don't use AI. I think it's much more realistic to lean in and say, look, AI has risks. Let's make sure we're all managing them responsibly. So I've only got a few minutes left, so I'm going to pick up the pace here. If you have any other questions or suggested topics that you'd like to hear us talk about, please post them in the QA before the end of the webinar. Now I'm going to move on to how will Fliplet use AI. So broadly, we're thinking about AI in three phases: short-term, mid-term, and long-term. Short-term, really just using prompts, taking the output and putting it into apps. And you'll see some examples of this in a moment. Mid-term, this is where we start to require things like agents to do multiple interactions with AI. The agents, most of them only came out about 4 weeks ago. They're still very immature. So we're putting that in midterm because we believe the technology will continue to evolve very rapidly. And then long term is where AI starts to have direct integrations with other third-party services. OpenAI is already working on this with their plugins, and we're expecting that this is going to take off like wildfire because it's actually very easy to integrate your service into AI, which will in turn dramatically increase the value of AI. But we are dependent on a lot of integrations being built. So that's why we've put it in long term. So, Sophie, what ideas do you have for Fliplet and AI?
Thanks, Ian. So Ian and I actually had a conversation about AI and how Fliplet could start using the AI tools and integrating them. And this was about 4 weeks ago. It's really interesting to see in 4 weeks just how much change has already been and how much has progressed in terms of what tools are available. So I'm just thinking about two ways that we could implement AI into Fliplet. The first one I can think of is creating user-friendly chatbots. And the reason I say this is the amount of times I've been the user of a chatbot to try to resolve an issue that I'm having, and the chatbot frustratingly doesn't understand the prompt of the question you're asking it. I feel like this is a great way that you could integrate the two. And with the emergence of generative AI, I can see companies being able to utilize low-code apps like Fliplet and generative AI to create high-quality chatbots to save both the user and the business time and frustration. That's just a really personal one because it really, really bugs me. And secondly, knowledge management systems. So by combining Fliplet and AI systems, which can use internal data such as emails, documents, and chats to identify relevant information and trends, internal mobile apps can then provide employees with access to this knowledge and insights, improving decision-making and problem solving. And that's also really beneficial from a user perspective because it makes finding that knowledge so much quicker.
Thank you, Sophie. They're great examples. And actually, you've covered a couple of the things that I'm about to talk about as well. So let me dive into it. I'm just warning everybody now, even if I spoke at a million miles an hour, we're probably not going to get through all of this in the next 5 minutes. So I apologize. If you do need to drop, don't worry, we'll send you the recording. But if you can stick around for a few more minutes, I promise you I'll go as quickly as I can to let you get onto your next meeting. So how can you use AI to produce apps quickly with Fliplet? So here are our short-term ideas. The first is content generation. So that means content in screens, data in data sources, images, videos, audio files. All these things that I said are already kind of commoditized and being done fairly regularly. Translating content, AI is really good at translating content. We've been blown away. We've been testing it internally. Everybody who can speak another language at Fliplet has had to go and run translations and tell me how good they are. Unanimously, they've all said amazing, about 100 million times better than Google Translate, which is very promising. Also because translating content is kind of boring. Content for complex features inside Fliplet, such as quizzes, decision trees, etc. We're going to be teaching AI how to generate the content for these through prompts. So it'll mean that you can generate these content for these features much faster. And I'll give you an example of how you could use that today if you wanted to. Code generation, feature generation, so generating forms for you, generating lists from data source and other complicated features, analyzing app usage data and making recommendations about how you can improve your app based on its usage data, and generating documents outside of Fliplet. So for example, generating marketing plans and promotional content to support your apps, and generating app plans or business cases to help create apps and get stakeholder sign off. So they're all the short-term ideas. Let me kind of walk you through some specific examples. So code generation. You can see here the prompt I used where I basically asked AI using the Fliplet form JavaScript API, Moment.js and jQuery, calculate how long somebody has been working at the company in years, months, and days, and put it into this part of the HTML on the screen. So this is a little bit technical. If you're not a developer, you might not be able to follow this. But if you are a developer, you're probably looking at this going, wow, that's pretty cool. Like I couldn't have written the piece of code on the right in 5 seconds. It would only take me probably about 2 minutes to write that prompt. And that's exactly what I did. This code is very good code. It's very clean. What's more, as most developers know, it's fully commented, which makes it a big win because most developers don't like commenting their code. Other examples, that are relevant to Fliplet. You can use it to generate queries for data sources. You can use it to send emails or push notifications. You can use it to customize how forms work on screens. You can use it to explain, debug, and optimize code. So if there's a piece of code inside a Fliplet app and you want to understand what it does, copy it, paste it into AI, and ask it to explain it. And then you can integrate very quickly with the Fliplet REST API in any other coding language by asking AI, integrate with the Fliplet REST API. I want to do this. Produce it in C# for me or Python. It'll do it for you. Moving on, data and content generation. So again, you can see a prompt here, generate 10 example rows of data based on the following structure and example. I'll provide the column name first and an example afterwards. And then I gave it that information. On the right is the data that it generated. You can literally copy and paste this directly into Studio. It's data generation done in 30 seconds. No longer do you have to either struggle to create some example content in order to populate your test apps. You can produce realistic content in seconds without having to go and ask stakeholders to produce the content for you straight away. Other examples, and I tested these as well, generate a checklist of items when reporting a data breach under CCPA, which is the Californian Consumer Privacy Act, include recommendations of what role or department within a company should complete each item. Now, again, this is not, we're not suggesting that this is highly competent or a trusted source, as Sophie and I both pointed out, but it is a great way to get started. And some of the questions that so some of the items that it came up with, I was really impressed at. And then second, generate 10 questions, each with 4 multiple choice answers per questions about CCPA, indicate which is the correct answer so that you can take the content and build a quiz directly into your app using the content or be inspired by the content that it gives you. Again, double check that it's right because it might think it's right and it might not actually be correct. Form generation demo. So I'm just going to make sure I'm on mute. Okay, it looks like it's on 1.5 speed, so it's saved its settings. This is a demo that we've been working on internally where we can explain to Fliplet Studio what we want AI to build in a form. So here you can see I'm asking for a user to kind of an edit user form. Now, the downside that I highlighted earlier is just how slow this is. So as you can see here, and this is at 1.5 speed, so it actually took even longer than this. I just sped it up because I didn't want you guys waiting and watching a spinner during the webinar. But you can see this is how slow it is. This is one of the reasons why, jumping back to what I said at the very beginning, you do need to use Fliplet and our caching features and things like this to actually make AI palatable, particularly inside mobile apps, where I'm not sure how tolerant users will be to waiting 30 seconds. So here we're asking it to generate a terms and conditions form, but we're also asking it to suggest content that would go inside the form. So like structure it with instructional content. And this gets us a different result as well. This is significantly more complicated than the last one, which is pretty basic, email, password, and bio field. What's interesting about the previous example is it assumed a bio field should be a multi-line text box as opposed to a single line text box. So here you go, you can see that it's asking at the very top, like it's asking you to accept the terms and conditions, and then it's also factored in GDPR underneath and gone into a bit more detail. And you can see that it's not just generating it on screen, it's actually configured the components. So now you can just go in and modify what it's given you. And then finally, and this is the most sophisticated example, a form to create a LinkedIn post. But what we also do, and this is a huge time saver, is we ask it to include a select box of all European countries. So if anybody's ever been in the situation when they have to build a select box of European countries, it's a pain in the backside having to go and find a list and then kind of format it into your format, etc. This basically just generates it for you. And it's fully editable. So if there are some countries that you don't want included, you can just take them out. All it's done is generate the configuration for you, and then you can manipulate it afterwards. So we're really excited about this kind of simple demo. This was built on the AI API that I mentioned earlier that is available now to our paying customers. So if you're interested to start playing around with how you can use AI in your apps and you're a developer, you can do that today. So I've had to fill quite a lot of time. Here we go. We've got the country field, and here you can see that it's put in all of the European countries for us. So moving on. Midterm ideas that we have around how Fliplet will help you use AI to help you create apps, create new screens, configure the design and appearance settings, create test plans based on your app's actual structure and features, assess and recommend improvements for app security and functionality, And we've also got some long-term plans around automated app testing, app monitoring, recommendations based on the user's usage of the app. So how can you use AI within your apps to improve your apps? So short term, you can add a chat interface so users can ask questions, which is exactly what Sophie mentioned earlier. You can use AI to summarize your data based on a user's request. So instead of just giving them the raw data and asking them to read it all and understand it, you can actually ask them, like, we've got all this data about privacy legislation, for example, or all this data around how to manage cyber issues. What is it that you actually want to know? We'll then interpret that data and we'll summarize it for you in a way in which you want to see the information. And then the other thing, and I'm personally really excited about these use cases, is instead of a user coming into the app and getting generic content that has been created, kind of a one size fits all, you now will be able to generate content based on the user's demographics. So as a user, I could come in and say, I'd like to create an emergency checklist. And you can say, tell us what type of emergency it is. Oh, well, it's a disaster recovery for our data room. Okay, and what industry you're in? Oh, we're in the agriculture industry. Okay, and are there any standards that you want us to base this list on? Oh yeah, ITIL and ISO 27001, generate. And then it'll come up with a list. Now, again, it's just an example list. So you would then want the user to be able to modify it. But the point is it's given a set of customized data to the user to help them get going. And you can see that we've got a number of other use cases listed there as well. Midterm ideas, the ability to access your app's data and features via a ChatGPT plugin. Obviously, you would have to allow that to happen, but if you did choose to allow it to happen, people via ChatGPT would be able to access your data. There's rumors going around that ChatGPT is going to become the new app store, a new way in which you can access lots of different services. You'll be able to access your app's data via Teams or Slackbot, because one of the aspects of Teams is if you ask like, hey, could you pull the data from this app about this? It would then need to be able to understand that, interpret it, run a query, get the data back, format it so it's appropriate for Teams, and then display it in Teams. So that's another way in which you can use AI. And then finally, voice chat, which Sophie and I about a month ago geeked out massively on, the ability to be able to just communicate via voice with your data and have conversations with it. And that, I think, is hugely exciting. And a number of people have already got that working by extending Siri to then interact with AI. And then long term, we know generating notifications that are relevant to users is hard. We believe AI would be able to do this really well. It can analyze an individual user's historic usage. It can figure out what types of things they've previously done, and it can tell them, oh, look, we've got some new news items. We know you like the news feature. You've used it for the last 3 times you've used the app. Let's tell them about the news. Whereas you might tell somebody else a different message to get them to re-engage with the app. So we're going to be experimenting with that last one internally before we give it out to any customers, but we're really excited about the potential for AI to really personalize messages based off user data. So next steps, if you're not already, follow Fliplet on our social media channels. We're pretty much on everything you can think of. That will mean that you get our latest updates related to AI. You can join our community and ask questions about AI on community.fliplet.com. You can review our monthly emails. So if you're signed up to Fliplet, you should be getting them. And if you're not, feel free to check out your spam folder. It might be in there. If not, get in touch with us. We'll tell you how to subscribe. You can definitely start using some of the prompts that I mentioned or something similar with ChatGPT today for free. And of course, there are lots of other AI products that you might want to experiment. Midjourney is a great image generator if you haven't played around with it. And then if you're a developer, feel free to have a bit of a play around with our Fliplet AI APIs. And if for some reason you'd like kind of access to that, but you haven't yet got around to becoming a paying customer, just get in touch with us. We'll see if we can help you out. That concludes our webinar. Thank you very much for sticking around. I apologize for going a little bit over. If you are interested, we'll be sending out information about the next AI webinar coming up on the 17th of May. And we've got a number of other webinars that we're going to be covering as well. So hopefully we can see you again soon. Thank you very much for participating. Thank you so much, Sophie. It was great to have you.
Thank you.
And I hope everybody has a fantastic day.